Do you have doubts Jesus is alive? In Luke 24, angels appear to the women who'd come to the tomb, telling them that Jesus is alive. Now, in their culture, a woman's testimony was not considered reliable. But in God's kingdom, women were the first to proclaim that Jesus is alive. There's a remarkable story of two disciples walking along the road and somehow unable to recognize the risen Jesus. He then walks them through how the Messiah is included throughout the Hebrew Scriptures. And it's as they share a meal that they realize who this was. Then they proclaim, Jesus is alive. Jesus then shows up with several of the disciples, and it says that many of them were still doubting. If those who were with Jesus, alive after his death, struggled with doubts, we shouldn't beat ourselves up when we struggle with doubts. Now, there's lots of evidence that Jesus rose from the dead. From the fact that these disciples who had abandoned Jesus were now proclaiming he was alive, even if it meant costing their life. We can look at the prophecies written hundreds of years before and see how they were fulfilled in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, specifically Isaiah 53. And there's lots of remarkable stories of people seeing Jesus alive, even after his ascension, like Saul, who became known as Paul, the church planter and author of most of the letters in the New Testament. You can read apologists like Sean and Josh McDowell, J. Werner Wallace, Lisa Fields, and Mary Jo Sharp, just to name a few. But regardless of all the evidence, it still requires a step of faith to follow Jesus. Every relationship requires a step of faith. For me, the greatest evidence has been my experience with Jesus in my own life. I've never had a vision of Jesus. I've never heard an audible voice, but I can tell you when I surrendered my life to follow him, he's made himself real to me. And I can see him at work in my life and in the lives of those around me. If you have doubts, lean into them. Seek after God. Allow him to bring you the answers, or at least the peace, while you're in the journey to discovering that Jesus is alive. And if you know that to be true, help others discover the same.